My name is Leena. I am 34. I have never liked the sound of the word forever. It smells too much like expectation and too little like work. That night, when Caleb's voice had been a flat, clinical thing telling me to leave, for both our sakes, forever rearranged itself into a single decision: get out now. The apartment that had been our small, private geography for years, its thin curtains, the stain on the kitchen counter where we'd once both spilled coffee and laughed, suddenly felt like someone else's set piece. He pushed me through the door like a finality. I stepped into the dark and the rain and everything that would follow. I didn't plan an exit. No one writes a graceful checklist for being told you're not welcome in the place you helped build. I grabbed a small bag, 3 shirts, the photograph of my mother at a wedding when she looked 22 and invincible, the little dish my grandmother used to keep her bobby pins in. I left my keys on the counter. I left a note that said only, "I'll call tomorrow," because habit makes us polite even when we are collapsing. On the sidewalk, the rain stitched itself into the collar of my coat. I walked until my shoes were heavy and my cheeks felt like paper. I thought about going to a friend's house, about calling my sister, about the predictable kindness of people who will make tea and act stunned. I thought about the father I had lost 5 years earlier, the man who kept his pocket money in a tin and left crossword puzzles half finished at breakfast. He had been practical in a way that would have made my grief feel less theatrical. When he died, he left me a small, battered bank card tucked into an envelope with a note, "For when your luck runs thin." I had not imagined how literal that phrase would become. I found a small, cheap hotel that still had the 1980s chandelier glinting in the lobby. My hands shook so badly at the front desk that the credit card slipped out and skittered under the counter. The clerk retrieved it without comment. People working long, small hours learn faster than most how to be unobtrusive. I gave him the number to charge, and the room key felt heavier than it had any right to feel in my pocket. The card was a lifeline. Temporary, private, mine by inheritance. But even lifelines have knots. I tried to breathe in a measured way and not think about the way Caleb had closed the door like he was pushing dirt over a small, soft thing. I used the card 3 times in the next 48 hours. Once to pay for the room, once to buy food for the children who were staying with my sister for the night, and once to pay an emergency taxi because my phone, the one Caleb had always called more quickly than me, was dead. Each time the machine beeped, I felt a small fizz of relief. I thought I was doing something practical and quiet, moving through the logistics of survival. That's when the bank called. It started as a polite, automated voice asking if I had made a recent transaction. I said yes. That automatic bot then handed me to a human man with a name badge and a voice that lived just inside professional calm. He asked a few verification questions, and then his tone changed. Not dramatically, never dramatically, but the subtext shifted into caution, like a dog that lifts its head when it hears an unusual sound. "Ma'am," he said, "we've detected multiple large transfers out of your joint account today. I need to confirm whether these were authorized." I blinked. Joint account. The words landed like a thrown pebble. Caleb had always managed the finances, with a light, distracted hand that made me feel safe. He paid the bills. I paid attention to smaller things. School snacks, the birthday cards. Joint account. I remembered signing a few years ago, back when I thought joint meant shared evenings and cheap laughter. On impulse, I told him the card I was using belonged to my father, that I had been kicked out and I was trying to secure temporary things. He said, "I'm sorry, can you come to the branch? There's a hold pending and we need to verify the source of some transfers." That should have been a chance to go home and sit down and breathe. Instead, the man's words opened into a small, sharp cave of curiosity in me. I asked him, "What transfers?" And he hesitated, the way someone shows you an X-ray and waits for your breath. Then he read out an amount, 5 figures, that had left my account earlier that afternoon. It had been wired to a name I didn't know. At first, I thought perhaps it was a mortgage payment written in code, Then the name came, a woman's name, familiar sounding and impossibly precise. The bank had the transfer number, the receiving bank, an account identifier, and the timestamp. While I had been packing, and while my children had been asking where their father was, thousands of our savings had been moved out. I felt the air steady, as though someone had flipped a switch. The clerk said, "Ma'am, we can place a temporary freeze on outgoing funds if you'd like. But because it's already cleared, the next step is we can open an investigation. You might want to file a dispute." The words "file a dispute" hit something inside me, like an exam question I had not studied for. Fight? Protest? How could I, who had been told to leave by the man who managed these very accounts, navigate the very institutions he had used like a private script? I went to the bank that afternoon. The weather had brightened and the city seemed to clean itself of pity. But pity was not what I needed. The bank was a gray building with glass doors and men in suits who typed quickly and tried not to look surprised. I sat at a plastic chair and watched a woman from the fraud department pull up our transaction history. The screen reflected in her glasses like a small, merciless mirror. "Ma'am," she said, "there was a series of transfers, one to a private account, one to a transfer service, then a wire to an international beneficiary. The name on that beneficiary account matches a person connected to your husband's contact list. And there are deposits flagged as personal, significant sums." I felt something like a slow burn across my throat. I asked her quietly, "Is this illegal?" And she said, "We will open a case. It could be fraud, or it could be a voluntary transfer. Right now, it's evidence. Evidence." The word felt like armor. I could take that armor to a lawyer. I could take it to a judge. I could take it to someone who could help me stop doors from closing around me and my children. On the way out, the bank gave me a printed summary and a number to call. I tucked those papers into the pocket of my coat, and a plan started knitting itself, small and precise. Collect the evidence, get legal counsel, secure temporary custody measures, turn panic into process. The bank's panic had given me a new kind of resource, knowledge of an action that had happened without my consent. I did not yet know why Caleb had moved that money, but I did have confirmation that he had. I did not go to my sister. I did not go to a friend. I went to a lawyer, because revenge is a theater, and law is the stage on which you present your script. The lawyer was a woman who wore her hair in a tight bun and smiled with precision. She listened to me speak without interruption, and when I was done, she said, "Good instincts, Leena. We can request an immediate injunction to prevent further transfers and request urgent disclosure of the beneficiary details. We should also file for an emergency custody order for the children's financial care until this is resolved." The word emergency again. My life had narrowed into a cluster of urgent questions. Who had the money? Why? Was Caleb planning to leave the country? Was this simply an affair of the heart that required its own bank account? Or was there a deeper financial betrayal at work? We did not have to wait long for an answer. The next morning, I walked back to the apartment, because there are things you leave behind that are not things. A toothbrush, a photograph, the way sunlight used to fall on a certain chair. I knocked, and the door opened to discover the apartment in small, neat disarray, like someone had meant to find it endearing to leave the kettle half washing in the sink. Caleb didn't look surprised. He looked tired in a way that felt practiced. He asked me coolly, "Did you go to the bank?" I told him nothing. Lawyers teach you that words are currency, and you spend them sparingly. "No," I said, "but there's a lot to sort out." He shrugged like a man who has a habit of shrugging, and reached for my arm as if to pull me inside. I stepped backward. Later, I learned from documents that the beneficiary name belonged to a woman named Sophie, someone Caleb had introduced as a co-worker at a dinner months before. someone who had laughed a certain small way and had a smile that never tested me. Sophie had been in our apartment twice. Once, she'd delivered a plant. I had folded the plant into a corner of my life and labeled it harmless. Now, with a legal document in my pocket, that labeling felt like a mistake. The more the lawyer and I dug, the more it became clear that Caleb had been siphoning our joint funds little by little. The transfers were clever, small enough to be written off as spending until they became substantial. And then one day, when he thought the ledger private and his timeline assured, he pulled a larger sum and wired it to Sophie's account. He had not only been keeping emotional secrets, he'd also been moving our shared future into someone else's hands. What do you do when the man you loved treats your life like a ledger to be redistributed? Some people scream. Some people stage public spectacles. I had never been the screaming type. I preferred something quieter, meticulous, legal, undeniable. The lawyer filed emergency motions. The court granted temporary freezes on certain accounts and scheduled hearings. The judge looked at me like someone who had been given a complicated parcel to open. He asked the ordinary questions of the legal script. Who lives where? Who provides for the children? Who is responsible for the funds? I answered with the plain language of someone who had been awake at night, labeling receipts and counting months. All the while, my life continued to exist outside of forms. I took the children to school in the mornings and pretended more than I felt. I learned to tidy a small rented flat and to make tea the way Caleb never had because he believed in instant fixes. There were nights when the silence felt like an accusation, and mornings when sunlight found new corners of habitual joy. The heavy legal process had its own rhythm. Depositions, hearings, motions filed at odd hours. It is a cruel kind of theater designed to look like safety. I slowly learned the choreography. And then, one evening, came the call that made the world shrink into a single point of attention. Caleb called, voice oscillating between anger and the attempt at reason. "Leena," he said, "you're overreacting. You can't just—" I cut him off. The lawyer had told me to speak less on the phone. Everything can later be turned into a line in testimony. He begged. He blamed. He tried to make me feel like the oddity here. I let him talk. He finally uttered the sentence he thought would make me stop. "If you pursue this, I'll lose everything." It was not a threat so much as a confession. He had already chosen. The whole sordid architecture fell asleep within those few words. I could have used them to anger. I used them to plan. At the court hearing, the evidence was clean and ugly. The bank statements were a map of trust eroded. We presented the timeline, the late-night messages, the receipts for hotel rooms not near the city where he claimed work, the transfer that went from joint account to Sophie's private account. The judge listened. He did not look at me with disbelief. He looked at Caleb like a man choosing between narratives and asked the practical question. "Are you willing to reverse the transfers pending investigation?" Caleb faltered. The legal system believes in facts and in the weight of paperwork. It is not always poetic. It is instead an instrument. The judge ordered a forensic accounting and temporary restrictions. The law cannot unbreak things, but it can make a person accountable. For me, that accountability was starting line rather than finish line. I had wanted, in incandescence, to ruin him. I discovered something more useful: reclaim dignity and secure a future. After the hearing, the children and I went to the small park near the apartment. They climbed the same rusty ladder they had climbed the week before with him. They asked for ice cream. They asked the banal questions that do not fit into adult dramas. "Mama, will Baba be back for my recital?" My throat closed. I told them the truth in the way adults do when they want to keep children soft. "We're figuring it out." That felt like the highest honesty. There were days when the bank's procedures dragged and the legal bureaucracy felt slow as seaweed. There were nights when I sat with my small, practical retributions, conversations with the lawyer about asset division, calls to family members about custody plans, the quiet satisfaction of opening an account only in my name and seeing the routing number like a small, new frontier. It was not dramatic revenge. It was restoration by paperwork. Then the twist arrived, not in the form of a scandal on the front page or a viral video, but as an unexpectedly public, private thing. Sophie, who had always seemed careful, made a mistake. She sent Caleb a message meant for a friend, one of those voice notes we all send when we think we are alone. The message was raw and small and recorded in that casual voice that becomes dangerous because it is intimate. In it, she laughed at how he had played the generous husband and referenced an account number she'd shared with him for a holding place. Somewhere, in a digital misclick, the voice note was forwarded to a friend who was furious at the deception. That friend uploaded the voice note to a private group that then leaked. Within 24 hours, the little recording had made its way back to me. I listened once and then 10 times. Her voice was there, flippant, human, and Caleb's responses were the ones you only give when you think no one will listen. He spoke of escape routes, of keeping things tidy so no one would notice. He laughed about the smallness of moral consequence when you are careful enough. To hear the person you loved admit the thing you had suspected with bluntness and laughter was a small, savage clarity. It hurt, but it clarified. It made the world a place where I could take action without dithering. The leak did what leaks do. It changes public narratives. Friends began to message. People who had been cautious in their sympathies suddenly had a clear side. Some called me to say they had always worried. Others apologized that they had not seen it. Caleb left voicemails, one so thin with shame I almost felt sorry, and one so angry it made my hands tremble. The law began to move faster, as if the public noise had lubricated a process that had been stuck in routine. We reached a settlement that was quieter than a courtroom climax, but more thorough. The forensic accounting revealed more transfers, gifts signed by Caleb that had been miscategorized as business expenses. We arranged for reimbursement and for a fair division of the assets. More importantly, the judge signed off on formal custody safeguards, ensuring the children's accounts, college funds, and savings would be administered by me until an agreed date. Protection written in ink. It was not revenge built out of humiliation. It was a reweaving of safety. There were, of course, moments of human complication. Caleb tried to bargain. He offered apologies that seemed designed to be useful to his social image. He asked to keep certain items, to retain a sentimental guitar, to remain in contact. I practiced the art of saying no with kindness. Boundaries are not walls. They are the polite fences that keep a life tending to what matters most. I chose fidelity to myself and to my children over clinging to an image that had been convenient. In quieter scenes, I learned how to be alone and not lonely. I took an evening class in photography, the one I had always shelved because it felt indulgent. The camera taught me to look in ways that were not simply survival. I rewired mornings by planting a small basil pot on the sill. Steam from the kettle became ordinary and satisfying. I began, in small increments, to trust my decisions again. People sometimes ask whether I felt triumphant when the transfers were reversed, and whether the public exposure made me feel seen. The answer is complicated. There was a satisfaction in accountability. There was also a tiredness that only a long night shows you, an exhaustion in having to catalog your wounds for strangers. The most profound thing was quieter, the permission to live in a way that was mine. Selling the house would have been dramatic. Protecting the children's future with clear legal steps felt like a redemption that mattered more than spectacle. Months later, when the legal dust settled into a manageable thickness, Caleb moved out for good. He tried, briefly, to re-enter my life with an armful of promises. I listened kindly and then closed the chapter. He demanded explanations and arrogant phone calls. I answered with the steady voice of someone who had learned to count evidence instead of headlines. You had choices, I said, and I made mine. He asked whether I had wanted to ruin him. I told him I had only wanted to reclaim what had been entrusted to both of us. Though I had secured the practicalities, there remained the residue, the small human things that cannot be written into documents. Nights when the house was too quiet. Mornings when I would find a coffee stain on a shirt I'd washed and wonder if he would ever notice its absence. Moments when a song on the radio would call his name like a small, absent bird. Those ache places took time. They took friends' hands and afternoon visits, and the small courage to sit with a cup of tea when the world urged me to perform resilience. In the end, what I learned was not revenge, not the taste of satisfaction at another's fall. It was the quieter, more stubborn discovery that dignity can be defended with ordinary tools. Paperwork, counsel, community, and the consistent practice of refusing to be sidelined. The bank's panic, that cold professional alarm, had been the hinge. It told me an action had occurred. From that hinge, I built a door outward. I did not shout as I left. I signed. I did not orchestrate a scene. I filed. I chose silence where it was necessary, and firm action where it mattered. If you are carrying a similar quiet poison, know this: you are allowed to be methodical. You are allowed to use institutions to make things right. Public drama can feel like justice, but often justice is paperwork and a lawyer who listens, and a judge who can sign an order at 3 p.m. and make facts hold. You are allowed to make practical, not performative choices. You are allowed to put your children's future before your bruised pride. You are allowed to live, slowly and carefully, after a betrayal. Thank you for staying with me through this. It is heavy to tell and heavier still to live. If this story touched you, if it made you feel seen in any small way, press like, subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from in the comments. It helps these kinds of stories reach others who might be sitting with the same quiet hurt. Share a small kindness if you can.